His father always told him, the youngest son of Cyan Vert, that he must live for the sake of his family, for the sake of the clan. What he meant was that Cyan should not have his own desires, and remain near his older brother like a shadow. He did so in this battle. He was wounded in battle and waited for help to arrive. He heard someone's footsteps, and a mocking voice said that he was a magnificent sight, a knight fighting alone against the strongest commanders on the continent. Around Cyan Vert lay the bloody remains of his enemies. A man approached and laughed at Cyan and said that he was a beautiful shadow of his brother. Cyan Vert looked gloomily at his opponent. He knew well who he was and what he was capable of. He laughed openly, and there was not a drop of pity or generosity in his eyes. A suffocating fog enveloped Cyan Vert, and he asked who was forcing him to do this. The Emperor or someone else. Cyan's interlocutor covered his mouth with his hand and said that he knew about the sickening black fog and the rumors he had heard for a long time were not true. Cyan Vert is a killer from the darkness. Cyan rose to his full height, and his figure was completely shrouded in fog. For the Knights of Light, to which the man who came belonged, the mist organization is like fog. He will report to higher management that he has gotten rid of an unclean creature associated with the pagans. Cyan didn't mind if his enemy still had the opportunity to talk to him after the fight. When he's done with it, there won't be even a small fragment of a tooth left. But his opponent was not afraid. If Cyan was going to use secret power, he had better give up right now. He warned the knight that there was a magical barrier of the 9th star here. Cyan really wanted to get out of here as quickly as possible, and together with his older brother, find the culprit of what was happening. No barrier could frighten him or stop him. His eyes glowed with an ominous red fire. The confrontation between the two knights was interrupted by an authoritative voice that told Cyan to calm down and stop resisting. Cyan was dumbfounded when he recognized this voice and saw the person who uttered these words. His father always told him that he should live for the sake of the clan. His older brother Axel is an extension of the clan. The success of Axel Verto is the success of Cyan Verto. Standing in front of Cyan was his brother Axel. With horror, Cyan realized that he was the instigator of everything. His older brother, who was now walking in shining armor across the battlefield straight towards his younger brother. All the warriors bowed their heads before him. He approached Cyan, who knelt down helplessly, and said that apparently his brother was very taken aback by his appearance. Cyan really couldn't understand what all this meant, and turned to Axel with the question, "What the hell is going on?" Axel replied that Cyan always fulfilled his duties well, both to the clan and to the people, and before him personally, as a brother and ally. Cyan listened silently and waited for Axel to answer his question. He continued that he was just trying to remove a heavy burden from Cyan's shoulders. Cyan didn't know what he did wrong. He always protected and obeyed his brother. Axel looked at his brother indignantly. He is also a fool and does not understand that he did everything wrong. Take this disgusting ominous fog that accompanies it. Cyan is nothing more than a murderer. Axel can't call him human. Cyan had no words to object to his brother. Axel went into a rage and yelled that Cyan had been deceiving everyone for a long time. Let him not pretend that he does not know all his sins. Snatches of his brother's words flashed through Cyan's head. Murderer, sins. What is he even talking about, you crazy bastard? Qing's face gradually became distorted with anger. He was with his brother during the struggle for the throne in the Empire, when dozens of hands reached out to the crown. They fought together against the army of the Demon King, who staged a raid in hopes of a quick and easy victory. They fought a war to unify the continent and created a powerful state. He helped Axel achieve everything he set his mind to, because serving him was his life. And now his brother is leaving him. Cyan dug like a dog for 20 years under Axel's guidance. Cyan was already furious, and even if his body is torn to shreds, he is ready to give everything he has to destroy the treacherous scoundrel. A powerful explosion shook the area, and Cyan raised a great column of fog above him. The soldiers did not believe that Cyan still had so much strength left, despite the magical barrier. They came to the conclusion that this was not a person in front of them. Cyan in a thunderous voice demanded an answer from his brother. Does he want to kill his youngest because he is afraid of him? Is he not ashamed of such an act? Axel did not answer, but prepared to attack. Cyan rushed at him like a cannonball. Axel fought back with his sword. Cyan knew that he only had to hit his brother once, but Axel was a skilled fighter, and Cyan could not break through his defense. However, he did not give up and attacked again and again. He needed to hit his brother in a weak spot, so that he could not regenerate. Columns of red and yellow light rose above the site of the brothers' battle. But a third Boris intervened in their battle and threatened Cyan. He put up another magical barrier. A sparkling sword pierced Cyan's body, and the knife fell from his hands. Axel did not release the sword with which he killed his brother. He honestly wanted to do him a favor and grant him a painless death because blood ties are strong. But this idiot showed his true colors. Axel knew from the very beginning that Cyan was a demon. That's why he never trusted him. Cyan was dumbfounded by the new information. With a kick, Axel knocked his brother to the ground and pulled the sword out of the wound. He turned his back to the body and ordered Boris to leave. Cyan was left lying on the ground alone and dying. Of the words that he could say, only obscene ones remained. To live such a stupid life and die so ridiculously. What a regret. Axel walked further and further, without even turning to look at his brother. With the last of his strength, Cyan, gathering all his will into a fist, covered the distance that separated them in one leap. He was furious, and really wanted to drag the traitor to the grave with him. The guy had already put his knife to Axel's throat, and was ready to enjoy revenge. But Boris's strongest blow, which brought into action new magical knowledge, left Cyan no chance. What a stupid life he had, and what a stupid death. The last thing he thought about. The light in his eyes faded forever. The loud voice that called the young master made Cyan wake up. He was sweating profusely. His heart was beating so hard that it was ready to jump out of his chest. The girl in the maid costume angrily said that he had enough sleep. He needed to get ready, and he should be ready soon. Cyan was surprised to recognize Emily, and did not understand how she ended up here. More than 20 years had passed since he last saw her, but she had not miraculously changed at all. Emily could not tell whether the young master was still sleeping or delirious. Cyan noted that the room was similar to the one he lived in when he was young. He realized that he had become a child again. This news frightened him, and he did not hear what Emily was trying to tell him, and she said that there was no need to waste time. He would still go to training, no matter how much he liked it. Cyan didn't remember any training. He would have to understand how he ended up here, and the training can wait. He went outside and saw the houses of the Duchy of the Vert clan as they were in the past. Is this really how your whole life flies before your eyes before you die? Who would have thought that the images were so real? He remembered a time 27 years ago, 985 March 1st. There was a year left before entering the academy. Every year, dueling training is held in the duchy. Cyan's father, Duke Worth, attends the event, making it a very important event. Cyan's opponent is Cransworth, his half-brother and peer. His mother, Margaret Erzit, is the wife of the Duke. Crans is her own son, and for this reason he receives much more love and attention than Cyan, although they are both younger sons. Cyan was an illegitimate son, and after he was humiliated in this duel he became a universal laughingstock. The present Cyan remembered this well. Because of the shameful defeat, the father completely stopped paying attention to his son. Emily knew the young master's abilities well and quietly advised him to give up and not participate in the duel. Cyan was going to win, but he was not pleased that even the maid was looking down on him. An ordinary rapier seemed very heavy to the boy. He realized that his powers corresponded to his age. Emily was very worried that the boy would not get hurt. The reality of the sensations was so strong that Cyan doubted that these were just memories. He had heard that some magicians could create such illusions, or he really went back in time. Cyan's gaze hardened. The boys went out onto the playground, and Carnes mockingly asked if his brother would leave before the start of the fight. Cyan had no intention of running away. He had hoped that maybe he could try to change the future. The Duke waved his hand and gave the signal for the duel to begin. Krantz ran as fast as he could to attack, and Cyan just stood and looked at his brother. Krantz swung his sword and hoped to scare the boy into quickly surrendering. Cyan was surprised to realize that Krantz was moving very slowly, although in childhood he seemed very fast to him. Therefore he easily took a step to the side. He did not need to rush, and Kranz's sword plowed the ground. Cyan stood aside and watched his brother. The boy was very angry that his opponent was dodging like a coward. He hoped for an easy victory. Then Cyan, with a quick movement of his rapier, knocked the weapon out of Kranz's hands and hit him on the leg. Kranz turned pale in pain and hissed. Then he fell. Unable to stand, he grabbed his hurt leg and curled up. The Duchess was very afraid for her son. It was enough for Cyan to bring the rapier to Kranz's throat, and the duel would be considered over. But this was not enough for the boy. He remembered that Kranz always mocked him just for fun. He continued to mock him at the academy, where they were sent together. Therefore Cyan decided to trample Kranz so that he would not have the thought of showing his teeth. In this life, Cyan decided to forge his own path, and Krantz screamed in horror, because the sight of his brother did not bode well for him. As a result of the duel, Carnes lost. The Duke ordered Cyan to meet with him, and even made room in his schedule. Cyana was even assigned to accompany the Knight Yulkin. In the corridors of the castle, Cyan met the Duchess. She left the Duke's office and did not look happy. Cyan asked how Krantz was feeling. The Duchess's face twisted, and she sharply replied that the boy was an insensitive blockhead who dared to ask such questions after he had beaten his brother. Cyan explained to her that this is the whole point of the duel, to beat the opponent and moved on. He then heard the Duchess say that illegitimate bastards should not be treated as legitimate children. They'll get impudent. She continued that Cyan's mother is a slut, and the boy should have been on the street begging. And he still dares to win a duel. He should be grateful for being tolerated. Cyan thought that his aunt had crossed the line and maybe he should just kill her. It wasn't a good idea. He knew how to make the Duchess suffer all her life. In an innocent voice, he asked his stepmother if she knew that he was also going to the academy with Krantz. The woman did not understand what he was getting at. The guy explained that he was sure that she would like to see her son with intact arms and legs, or she doesn't care about him that much. The Duchess twisted with impotent anger. How dare this impudent bastard talk to her like that and threaten her? She swung her hand to hit the boy. Knight Yelkin covered the boy with his hand and interrupted the nascent quarrel. The Duke ordered Cyan to be brought as soon as possible, so there was no time for family squabbles. It was time for them to leave. Yelkin looked gloomily at the Duchess. No one dared to challenge the Duke's orders, and his wife silently left, not daring to object. Her fists were tightly clenched with impotent anger. Cyan slowly rejoiced at this small victory. He was protected by the night guard who received this order. He doesn't even obey the Duke's wife. How cute and reliable it is. It had been almost 15 years since Cyan had met his father one-on-one. The boy entered the hall and said that Cyan, the youngest child of the Vert family, was greeting his lord and father. Duke Williams Worth, the great feudal lord of Velia, the western fief of the Ushif Empire, looked out the window. When his son arrived, he ordered him to sit down. Cyan's father was known throughout the world as the guardian of the continent, a hero who stopped the invasion of demons for a long time. With the help of his remarkable magical powers and worldly wisdom, this man bore a responsibility that no one placed on him. Right before his death, he fought with the army of the Demon King. All he wanted was peace on Earth. Cyan now believed that his father was a stupid man who used his free will to live in service to others. The boy sat down opposite the Duke. The father noted that during the duel, Cyan followed the movement of the sword and dodged. Cyan did not understand the question, and asked again what his father meant. At the moment when Krantz rushed at him, Cyan was looking directly at the trajectory of the sword swing, and he turned to avoid him. The Duke asked when did Cyan learn defense. Cyan replied that he trained a little on his own in the evenings. As far as the Duke knew, his youngest son had never been interested in fencing. Why did he hide such excellent skills? Cyan feigned modesty and replied that he didn't want to stand out. However, he gave it his all to defeat Krantz. According to the father, the last blow to the prone Krantz was of course unnecessary. Does Cyan agree with Dad? The boy thought about it. The Duke's intentions in this matter were not obvious to him. Dad trying to understand what his son is capable of. He said carefully that he wanted to prove something. The father asked what exactly did Cyan want to prove. The boy resolutely replied that he wanted to prove that despite sharing the same blood as Krantz, he was the best. And this is the meaning of the duel. The Duke laughed. The son gave an excellent, clear, and concise answer that demonstrated his poise. Dad didn't know that his son was so talented, and this delighted him. Someday Cyan will become a reliable and indispensable support for Axel. Cyan couldn't believe his ears. What is the old man saying? Is he out of his mind? Why would he become his killer's assistant? Nothing has changed and Dad is still obsessed with his precious eldest son Axel. The Duke, meanwhile, had no idea what his son was experiencing and was about to reward him. If Cyan needs something, he can say so. Cyan promised in his heart to destroy everything that Axel would do, and out loud he expressed his desire, which was very unusual for a boy of his age. Amelia screamed at the top of her lungs. What did Cyan think when he answered the Duke's question that he wanted to go to the battlefield? Cyan reassured her that it was still unknown whether he would be allowed to do this, and the maid thought that the boy had gone crazy. Does he have any idea what a battlefield looks like? It is infested with evil and terrible demonic creatures. Velius, the western fief of the Ushif Empire, is the only place on the entire continent that can be called a battlefield. The Lemay Valley, which can be called the front line, is a ferocious place where battles with demons have been going on for hundreds of years. The father, taken aback by his son's request, set a condition for him. Within a month the boy must become worthy to go to the valley. Cyan didn't know how his worth would be measured. Therefore he decided to simply get stronger physically and become as strong as possible in such a short time. Now he is weaker than his peers. He was lucky that he still had the sense of combat and skill that he had before his unexpected regression, and crumbs of magic that barely lived in his body. If he trains this body, he will be able to put it to good use. He decided to start training from today. A loud voice calling his name made the boy snap out of his thoughts. Standing in front of him was a girl whom he recognized as Alice. She grabbed Cyan by the chest and screamed, "Has he really gone crazy?" Cyan asked the girl the same thing. Alice screamed that she heard Cyan ask his father to send him to the front. The boy could not say a word, but Amelia seriously called for help. Alice believed that the victory over Kranz caused delusions of grandeur in the boy. She demanded that he go to the roof with her. She placed Cyan in front of her and said that she would only let him go to the battlefield after he could withstand his attacks for 3 minutes. The duel will begin as soon as they draw their swords. Cyan asked tiredly, "Is this really necessary?" Alice asked the guy to answer one question. Does he want to become an heir? Cyan didn't understand why she was acting this way. He's not at all interested in this nonsense. And he remained silent. Alice made sure that she was right and demanded that the boy take out the sword. Chun was tired even during the duel with Kratz, but during this crazy day, he was not destined to rest. The girl went on the attack with lightning speed and instantly covered the distance that separated them. She struck, but Cyan automatically blocked it with his rapier. The girl was surprised that a 10-year-old boy was able to block her powerful blow. This didn't seem real. And Cyan was very angry that Alice was seriously fighting with her brother, who is 7 years younger than her. Waving her sword, Alice jumped back to her original position. She knew that the rapier had a very light blade, but nevertheless, Cyan parried the attack of her sword. This puzzled the girl. She reassured herself that the boy was just lucky, and laughed. Cyan had better intuition than she thought. Cyan vaguely realized that he was about to die, and tried to say something to Alice, but he didn't have time, because she had already rushed to attack the boy again. She swung her sword in a jump. Cyan took the blow on the rapier, which he squeezed with all his might. His face was distorted with tension. The rapier and sword slid and freed themselves from each other. Now Cyan's rapier was at Alice's throat, and her sword was ready to strike the boy's chest. Cyan twisted the sword with all his might. It was difficult for him. The opponents scattered in different directions without causing damage to each other. Tsang flew up onto the roof railing. He was very worried. If he had not twisted the sword halfway, he would have killed Alice. The skill of fencing haze, thick fog, consists mainly of techniques designed to destroy the enemy. It is difficult to fight while controlling the pressure, because he does not yet have enough strength. When will these 3 minutes end? He compensated for his weakness by imbuing the sword with mana, but he was already almost at his limit. Alice muttered to herself a call to the earth and whined to come and serve as her sword. Cyan recognized the magic of the 6th star in her whisper. The girl's face distorted, and a water blade flashed in her hands. Cyan realized that she was going to kill him, and this is not a test, but a real duel. Alice has only one thought left in her head. She cannot lose. If Cyan can even place a block, he will fall off the roof. All he could do was rush into the attack. Alice raised her blade for the decisive blow. Hyokin burst onto the roof shouting for everyone to stop. He scattered the fighters in different directions with one blow. With a stern face, he reminded Alice that her opponent is much younger and more inexperienced than her. Alice continued to stand in a fighting stance, but she was held back by Hyokin's sword, which he pointed at the girl. The knight held Cyan by the scruff of the neck at a safe distance. Cyan really expected Hyokin to appear, and was glad of his intercession. Alice suddenly transformed and rushed to hug Cyan. She asked for forgiveness and said that she had lost her mind for a minute. She really wanted to stop him from going to the battlefield and was too obsessed with it. Cyan knew that his sister was an elite of the elite who had achieved top marks in all subjects at the Royal Academy, where children with unique talents in swordsmanship, magic, or other subjects gathered. In addition, she was very beautiful. Her beauty was amazing, and people called her the divine child. From a young age, she was taught to wield a sword, and along with her eldest son, Axelworth, was called the future guardian of the continent. However, shortly after joining the Order of the Knights of Light, she was killed. Cyan missed his sister very much, and this time he was firmly convinced that he would save her. He hugged Alice tightly. Alice turned to Hyokin and asked why he, the Duke's guardian knight, was not with him. The Duke has just left for the front. Hyokin replied that he was following the Duke's orders and protecting the young master, although the Duke asked to keep it secret. Xian felt Hyokin's presence all the time, but did not understand why his father ordered Hyokin to secretly guard him. The next day, Alice returned to the academy. She came for a short time, only to see her father after graduation. Cyan knew he needed to get stronger, so he had been focusing on strength training for the past 2 weeks, but 10 push-ups was his limit. He fell exhausted to the floor. He was confident in his abilities, but did not know how to return to his adult body faster. The maid came in and said that Cyan had a package from Alice. It was a bottle that smelled extremely disgusting. It was the blood of a hellhound, a rare item that can be found in the Linnea Valley, but you can also buy it on the black market. The blood of demonic beasts was considered poisonous due to its smell, but, in fact, it increased the mana and strength of the one who persisted with it, although most considered it a stupid fairy tale. Cyan knew from experience that this was true. To Amelia's horror, he was about to drink this stuff. If he could eat what Amelia cooked, for example mushroom soup, after one spoon of which Cyan's heart stopped for a second, this drug will definitely not harm him, and he took the drug. Amelia waited for the young master's reaction, and he said that it was very tasty, after which the boys went outside to check the effect of the drug. He couldn't go to his usual place to train often, because Yulkin carried out the Duke's orders and kept an eye on him all the time. Cyan remembered that Axel once received a divine revelation from the god of light. It said that somewhere in these mountains there was an ancient temple hidden. Of course, divine revelation has not yet descended. Cyan decided to look for the temple before Axel. So far, only he knows about the temple. He found a place where there was a huge concentration of mana and extended his hand there. Axel couldn't even imagine what Cyan was doing now, and Cyan found it very amusing. An explosion shook the ground, and ancient steps appeared in front of the boy. He began to climb down them. Everything here was different from how it was the last time he appeared here. This place is the ancient temple of the god of light, Lumendel. He stood here until the entire history of this land was erased. This happened because of the war between gods and demons, which happened 300 years ago. Who would have thought that this place existed in the mountains right behind the castle? Ahead, Cyan saw a sword that glowed in the darkness. 999 years before the founding, 12th of August. The people finally managed to drive the Demon King's army out of Velius. She was much stronger, but people found ancient relics, weapons of the gods, which allowed them to gain the upper hand. One of the relics was the sacred sword Duran, blessed by the god of light Lumendel. He was recognized as the decisive factor in humanity's victory over demons. In the future, Cyan will meet his death from this sword, which will be wielded by Axelworth. Perhaps Duran's sword has something to do with Cyan's regression. The boy touched the sword. As he expected, nothing happened. This ruined his mood. The sacred sword was absolutely useless. He noticed that when a beam of light was directed at the sword, a shadow appeared that seemed otherworldly. Cyan walked towards her. At first he thought it was just a sword shadow, but the angle of incidence of the light was not the same. This is not a shadow, the boy realized. Where there is light, there must be darkness. The boy leaned over the shadow and used mana. A path opened before him, which led to another room, hidden by an altar of light. Cyan entered the room and saw another sword. It was time to see him. It was his demonic sword Karam. Cyan took it in his hand. He swung his sword a few times and felt joy. The sword had not yet woken up, but Cyan continued to lunge. Suddenly there was laughter in the room and a voice asked if the child was not afraid to wake him up. Cyan hoped that now the sword would definitely be his. A huge inhuman figure rose from the ground. Cyan woke up the sleeping demon sword. The demon broke into a wide smile and told the boy that his body now belonged to the demon. The monster jumped on the child, but he was not taken aback and grabbed him by the throat. The demoness took on her sinister form and asked who dared to treat her like that. Cyan replied that she was not so rash before and thought before acting. This sword is his and no one can take it. Cyan's eyes lit up with red lights. With a twisted paw and claws, the demoness tried to take the boy's sword away, but Cyan deftly parried her blow and threw her back. The demon did not understand who was standing in front of her. She again took a fighting stance and prepared to attack. In the swirls of power, a small child stood in front of her. Is it really he who is the successor? She felt Eru's aura from him. Cyan confirmed that he is Eru's successor. Now he is her master, and she needs to be respectful to him. The demoness really didn't like the fact that she would now be commanded by some brat. Her face contorted with anger. She couldn't accept it, and Cyan did it again. He responded to her attack with blows of his sword. Words are indispensable here. The purpose of a demonic sword is to take over the owner's body. There is no choice, we must fight. Cyan repelled the demon's attacks. In order to fight successfully, he needed to take control of the sword's powers. He tried to do this, and was able to throw the demon away. He invited the demon to recognize him as its master, but she did not want to agree that the snotty boy would command her. She had controlled the sword more and more, and finally the demoness recognized him as her master. Now that Cyan had done everything he wanted, he needed to return to the castle. He's been gone too long. He took the sword with him and the demon was very happy. He hadn't breathed fresh air for so long. In the air she was transformed and began to smile. Her mood improved, and she asked what her owner's name was. The boy replied that his name was Cyan Vert. She had never heard such a name, and was surprised whether Eru really chose the child as his successor. Yes, I chose it in a past life. Cyan has already died once. The demoness was amazed by what she heard. Cyan approached the Sword of Light. It was still sleeping, and it had to sleep and wait for its owner for another 20 years. With one blow of his sword, Cyan cut the hilt of the Sword of Light in half. This action made the demon's hair stand on end. What's the guy going to do with the chopped handle? Cyan was confident that his action would make the future very interesting. He smiled happily. A carriage drawn by 2 horses was driving along the road. She stopped and Cyan in armor came out. Time flew by and he could not believe that the day he had been waiting for had arrived. He greeted his father, the Duke. The Duke asked him if he had changed his mind about going to the front. If he changes his mind, his father will not scold him. Cyan's heart was already on the battlefield, and no one could dissuade him. The Duke ordered Yolkin to open the magic scroll. Cyan was very interested in what or who they were calling. Yolkin opened a scroll with writing that glowed red. Yolkin picked up the scroll and a strange creature appeared from the ground. A hellish creature in fiery flames moved towards Cyan. The boy recognized the low-ranking demonic beast from Lemmy Valley. It seemed his father and the knights were preparing a test for him. He clenched the sword in his hand. The Duke and his retinue stood nearby and were fully prepared to help Cyan if he was in serious danger. The Duke believed that his son should be responsible for his words and let him prove how strong his desire is. Let him pass this test and show everyone what he is worth. Shortly before this test, Yolkin had a conversation with Cyan. The boy wanted to fight him. The knight did not know whether to laugh or cry from such impudence of the boy. Cyan remembered that there were only 3 days left before the deadline set by his father, and he could not find a partner for sparring, and was simply waving his sword in the air. Mess. He wants to know what a real bay is, and really asks the knight to help him. Yolkin suggested that Cyan find someone more age-appropriate. For example, his brother Krantz could fight him. Unfortunately, Krantz runs away every time he sees Cyan, and it is impossible to catch up with him. Yolkin agreed with a sigh. He threw away the sword and decided that he would use the scabbard to repel the boy's attacks so that he could run around with the sword as much as he wanted. Cyan thanked the knight and said that Yolkin should under no circumstances tell the Duke about this, and this is an order. Yolkin was dumbfounded by this turn. Cyan attacked the knight and struck him with a blow which he parried. He noted that the blow was very heavy, and it was difficult to believe that it was inflicted by a 10-year-old child. The attacks continued, and the knight was surprised at how quickly the boy moved. Suddenly Cyan disappeared. Yolkin could not understand where he had gone, and he was already jumping over the knight. Yolkin barely had time to notice his little opponent's feint. He turned and deflected the attack from behind. Cyan attacked from all sides, and his blows became stronger and faster. But so far the boy has not been able to defeat such an experienced knight. They stopped fighting, and Cyan thanked Yolkin for a great fight. Yolkin responded by saying that the young gentleman did a great job. He was surprised that the weak Cyan had grown so much. Yolkin was confident that now Cyan would be able to withstand any tests that would fall to his lot. The hellish monster was heading straight for the boy. It seemed very tasty to her. The monster picked up speed and jumped onto its lunch. Cyan quickly cut the monster with his sword and avoided a direct collision. He needed to finish this battle as soon as possible, because with his current powers, fighting monsters was difficult. The monster went on the attack again. Cyan jumped up and thrust his sword into the creature's head from above. Dad and the knights opened their mouths and couldn't believe their eyes. Hell's monster lay on the ground. The Duke applauded his son. His victory impressed everyone present. The Duke said that he would be glad to meet Cyan at the front, and left. The demonic sword called out to Ching with a strange question. Does it really look like a kitchen knife? Chan reassured the demoness that she was a very good sword, to which the demoness replied that she needed blood and war. Why doesn't the boy use a sword, but only a rapier? Cyan replied that he would soon use the sword so often that he himself would ask for rest. A bell rang alarmingly in the human camp. A huge ogre armed with a battle axe appeared in the northwest. The Duke ordered a line of defense to be created and destroyed. Do not leave any of the creatures alive. Operation Restraint Rescue has begun. The soldiers came out in full combat readiness to meet the enemy. There were many ogres. They walked towards people and filled the space with a fighting roar. There were more and more of them. The creatures climbed out of the stones and joined the army of monsters. The Duke gave the order to attack the creatures, and the soldiers rushed into battle. They immobilized the ogre leader with magical ropes, and one of the knights tried to break through and destroy the monster. The ogre tried to break free from his shackles. The knight was able to hit the ogre under the knee with his sword, and he began to fall with a wild roar. Cyan sat on his horse and watched as the defeated monster fell down next to him. Amelia, who was standing behind, was not happy about her presence here. She was sobbing and wanted to know why the hell the young master was so eager to get here, and whether he liked everything that was happening. Cyan was thrilled to be back on the battlefield. Nostalgia overwhelmed him, and he was pleased to see the familiar, hellish landscape again. Dad drove up to his son and asked how he was feeling. Cyan replied that he was a little nervous. The Duke advised his son not to let his guard down. Here you never know where danger lurks. At the front, similar situations occur at every step. Usually there are 3 or 4 battles a day, and each has a detailed response guide. The Corps consists of capable, trained knights who deal with all monsters trying to cross the front line. They live in tents. The tent in which Cyan lives is located in the farthest area, where it is safest. There are guards assigned to him to protect him, and Cyan did not have the opportunity to enter the battle and feed his sword. Cyan watched gloomily from the tent outside. Amelia wept bitterly. She remembered well the Duke's words that they could all die. Cyan advised her to pack her belongings and get out of here. The girl screamed that she couldn't leave the young master. The boy was completely helpless. If she escapes from the monsters, who will take care of the child? Cyan's eyes widened when he heard such an opinion about himself. The girl resolutely left the tent, shouting for the boy to hurry up. It was time for him to have lunch. Cyan seriously thought that he needed to drive away the impudent woman who allowed herself to talk to her master like that. At night, Cyan made a doll that was supposed to replace him in bed in order to deceive Amelia. He was about to go outside, but Amelia raised her voice and asked if he was going to go train again. Cyan almost jumped in surprise, but the girl only praised him for his persistence. The Duke will be very proud of such a son. Cyan left the tent and asked the girl to tell everyone that he was sleeping. At the forefront of the front, night guards are usually strengthened. If Cyan fails to get out now, then it will be difficult to move around later. He used the 3rd step of thick fog, missed descent, and was completely enveloped in crimson power. The place he was trying to get to was the lair of monsters, an ideal platform for using the carom sword. The sword also smelled a strong scent of blood. He no longer wanted to hold back and tried to cut at least someone. The monsters sensed the man's proximity and rushed to attack. Man and sword became one and prepared for battle. The fog sword, swift fog storm technique, has never failed. The sword flew, leaving behind crimson lines of power and killing monsters left and right. Cyan drank a potion from the blood of hellish creatures and felt very good. The sword was also very pleased. They had the whole night ahead of them, and there were plenty of monsters. 2 carriages rode along a mountain gorge, accompanied by guards. In one of them sat 2 girls, one of whom said that the front line was dangerous and it was better to turn back. The second asked not to be treated like a child. She is the princess of the empire, and her duty is to help her father in his campaigns. Her maid remembered that the youngest son of the Vertov family was also at the front. This was news to the princess. She did not hear that the Duke sent his son to the front. The maid replied that the guy volunteered himself. She and the princess are the same age and can become friends. The princess asked what her son's name was, and when she heard that it was Cyan Vert, she thought for a long time. The huge griffin was struck in the air. The Duke ordered to check whether people were injured from the attack of the creature. Everyone was safe. Everyone did a good job, and the detachment received the order to return to camp. Cyan walked over and placed his foot on the griffin's corpse. His father asked him how he was feeling. The boy replied that he learned something new every day. The Duke was sure that his son would soon ask to go home. But he lasted a very long time, and Dad was proud of him. He looked at his son with a gentle smile. In his previous life, he had never looked at Cyan like that, and he didn't even suspect that his father could be so kind. The Duke turned to leave and said that he needed to talk to the boy. Let him come to him in the morning. A huge monster jumped out of the ground. Shun managed to jump away. The monster was familiar to him. This is the Worm of Death. Usually they appeared only in the depths of the valley. The sword realized that the owner could not cope and asked him to give control to him for a while. Cyan had no intention of handing over control to the sword, but the sword insisted and promised that after the fight, he would give control back to Cyan. The worm instantly regenerated shallow damage, and it was useless to continue the attack with weak forces. A month has already passed since Cyan came to the front. He drank a potion from the blood of hellish beasts, but this was clearly not enough. He was still too weak. Therefore, he had no choice but to accept the offer of Karam's sword. The worm was approaching him with frightening speed. The thick fog, the 9th form of demonic sword manifestation, made it possible to carry out an attack and tear the thick skin of the monster. The monster was all covered with cuts, from which blood flowed. The sword attacked the monster again using the Misty Sword, 8 fluttering petals technique. They inflicted deep wounds all over the monster's body. Cyan merged from the swords into a single whole, and now his strength has increased several times. He crushed the monster. The Duke, accompanied by knights, looked at the slain hellish creatures. The mana was quite impressive, and one would think that a demon did all this. If it was a demon, people could not ignore it. The Duke ordered to inspect the area and burn the monster's corpse. The marks from the sword seemed familiar to the Duke. He didn't have time to think through the thought to the end when Yulkin called him. He found something worth looking at. They saw a huge worm of death, which no longer posed a danger to anyone. But who could kill such a monster? The Duke thought with horror that it could be that organization. The manifestation of the demonic sword allows Karam to take over Cyan's body so that the demoness can use her true powers. However, this risks the fact that she can completely enslave the boy if he lets his guard down. Cyan was resting in bed and realized that using Karam to destroy one monster was complete madness. If this had happened a month ago, his body would have simply broken down. Now everything hurts, and he can't get up. Karam said that she now understood what the problem was. Outwardly, Cyan looks like a child, but he acts like an adult. The level at which he communicates with her is too high for a beginner. He knows the entire geography of Lemay Valley very well, and his sword technique is a mist skill, as if he had been training for 20 years. He told her that he died once, and now the demoness understood, that Cyan has regressed, and she wonders why he didn't tell her anything. Cyan muttered listlessly that in his opinion, everything was already clear. But this did not suit the demoness. She became more and more angry. Karen came to the conclusion that the owner of the Sword of Duran killed Cyan, and there are only two options. The boy was killed in a duel, or betrayed. But she was inclined towards betrayal because Cyan looked very contemptuously at the sacred sword in the temple. And if you put two and two together, everything will become clear. Cyan's goal is revenge, but if Karen catches him in a mistake or weakness, she will swallow him right away. Cyan threw the demoness into a corner and advised her to know her place. Karen has not changed at all, as she was in his previous life. Cyan came out of the tent and was surprised by the bustle on the street. Amelia greeted him with a cry that the remains of a high-level monster had been found at the entrance to the valley. Cyan realized that she was talking about the death worm. Their conversation was interrupted by Yulkin, who said that the Duke was waiting for the young master right now. Cyan regretted that he did not have time to clean up the remains of the hellish creatures, because he had no time. His plan was to enjoy fighting before entering the academy, and he was afraid that his father would realize who was killing all the monsters. He was very nervous when he entered the Duke's tent and bowed. His father received him in his camp office. Cyan couldn't figure out what to say if his father asked him directly about what happened. The Duke got straight to the point of the conversation and asked what Cyan had done last night. The boy replied that he was tired and went to bed very early. The Duke remembered that the wounds on the monsters' bodies reminded him of his son's sword technique. Is he telling the truth? Or did the Duke himself come up with something that didn't exist? Cyan sat with a completely innocent look. It was hard to believe that such a child could kill hellish creatures, and especially the death worm, which was difficult for even experienced knights to cope with. He asked if Cyan knew about what happened near the camp last night. According to the Duke, what happened was the work of a secret organization of mist killers. The Duke believed that this case should be thoroughly investigated. This organization has existed since ancient times, and people do not know about its true goals. It is known that they exterminated countless nobles under the pretext of purification. This organization is notorious for leaving black fog behind its members wherever they go. One day they disappeared. The last time they were seen was 300 years ago, but the remains of the death worm were shrouded in black mist. This trace was left by the god of darkness Eru, the very idol that was worshipped by members of the mist organization. He was the source of their strength. If the Duke's assumptions are correct, it was the mist that destroyed the demonic creatures, including the death worm. Cyan was very surprised that his father was able to so accurately identify the culprit, especially since they had not heard about the organization for 300 years. He respected him even more. The Duke continued that no one could understand the reason for the sudden appearance of the mist, but Cyan needed to be careful. The Duke will report the incident to the Empire and conduct a thorough investigation. The boy was very glad that his father believed him and did not associate his son with killing monsters. The Duke, in turn, thought that Cyan was still very young, and he had no reason to get involved with mist. He turned the conversation to other news. The Emperor must visit their camp. He will arrive today. On this occasion, Dad wanted to ask his son for a favor. Cyan's eyes widened. What favor could the Duke ask of a 10-year-old boy? The sentinel knight announced the arrival of the Emperor, with the sound of his horn. The Duke, Lord of Velius, knelt before His Majesty in greeting. The Emperor joyfully greeted his vassal. No formal greetings necessary. They're friends. The Emperor got off his horse and hugged the Duke. Cyan also bowed before the Emperor and introduced himself. He is Cyan Vert, the youngest of the family. The Emperor was amazed that such a child lived in such a harsh environment. Truly, the Duke's children are completely different from other children. The favor that the Duke of Cyan asked for was that Cyan call himself his son, and not an illegitimate child. In a past life, Cyan, while visiting the Emperor, hid in the mansion and was not shown to His Majesty. Now his father was proud of him and trusted him. A girl got out of the carriage. The emperor introduced the fifth princess of the Ushif Empire, Aaron Severus, to the duke. Cyan knew well the tragic fate of the fifth princess. His father told him that he would have to accompany Princess Aaron all day. Cyan was not very happy about this assignment. The father replied that the boy would simply keep the princess company. They are the same age, and she also enters the academy where they will meet. In his previous life, Cyan saw the princess at the academy several times during breaks. The duke saw nothing wrong with Cyan establishing contacts with someone from the imperial family. He really wanted Cyan to get along with the princess. Moreover, it will not take much time. The boy was not happy. He did not understand his father's intentions. Perhaps he wanted a friendship to arise between him and the princess, which connects the duke himself with the emperor. But he clearly chose the wrong person. Princess Aaron doesn't want to be Cyan's girlfriend, although now he cannot object to his father. After all, only he knows the future. This is very annoying, but he will have to be an obedient son for now. The emperor and the duke, accompanied by knights, went to the camp. Cyan stayed with the princess, who without preamble asked why the water in the river was red. The boy replied that it was a river of blood. This is a river that flows through the entire Lemay Valley. Its color is explained very simply. Demonic beasts that are old and injured, and unable to fight others for their survival, instinctively jump into the river. Their corpses turn it red under the influence of mana. It's all pretty disgusting, and the princess shouldn't go there. And then there is the kingdom of demons, and if you walk along the shore you can meet their king. But no normal person would do this. Cyan found it funny to make fun of the princess. They were walking along the valley when a bright light flashed in the sky. This was the signal from the third frequency post in the west. The yellow light meant the approach of demonic creatures. Cyan immediately became serious. The princess didn't expect that there were demonic beasts here. The duke was already giving the command to protect his majesty, and was gathering a detachment of guardian knights to go to the third sentry post in the west. The emperor categorically refused protection. He didn't come here to sit around. He drew his sword and said that he missed fighting. The emperor gave the command to his squad to join the raid on the demonic creatures. They all need to be destroyed. The duke saw Cyan and ordered him to also join the detachment. The princess was surprised that the boy would also participate in the battle. She had to go to the shelter, but she did not want to sit in hiding and begged the boy to take her with him. Cyan didn't understand what she was saying. This is not a playground. This is where people fight and die. But the princess shouted that Cyan was her age and was already participating in the battle, and she wanted it too. No one will stop her. Cyan called Yulkin to resolve the issue. The knight immediately appeared and prepared to take the princess to safety. The princess was hysterical. How dare she be treated this way? Cyan directly told her that dozens of knights could die because of her whims. Every second of confusion on the battlefield can be decisive, whether a person lives or dies. Is the princess capable of taking responsibility for all these lives? With these words, he and the knights left, leaving the princess with the maid and Yulkin. The battle was in full swing. The guardian knights surrounded the disgusting monster. The duke commanded the entire battle. The order was to destroy all creatures and protect his majesty. The knights and the soldiers rushed to the attack. Dio Severus, emperor of the Ushif Empire, had 2 wives. The first, Diana Quiesel, died. The second, Cassandra Nepal, was a prominent representative of the judiciary. The first wife gave birth to the first and second princess, and the current wife gave birth to the third and fourth prince. The fifth princess, Aaron Severus, was the illegitimate daughter of an emperor and a peasant woman. People treated her with contempt, but Aaron didn't care how others perceived her. She fulfilled her duty as a member of the royal family and devoted herself to her studies. However, the nobles accused her of treason, after which Aaron was expelled from the royal family outside the empire. There were rumors that she died of illness on some island. That's why people called her the tragic princess. She could have lived a different life if she didn't have ambition and greed. And Cyan fought with the rest of the warriors and remembered everything he knew about the imperial family. The emperor fought the battle, and everyone noted that he was a very experienced fighter. His sword strike, holy lightning, struck demonic beasts left and right. Emperor Dion had the magic rank of 8th star. If he had not ascended the throne, he would have become the head of the Magicians' Association. The sword demoness and Cyan watched the battle, and came to the conclusion that a mid-rank hell beast was not a problem for the emperor, and the throne is more like his hobby. After the battle, the emperor and duke rested in a tent. The emperor shared alarming news with his friend. Recently, murders of the nobility have become more frequent, and this causes excitement. There is a frightening pattern to these murders. All these people were corrupt. Black fog was noticed at all murder sites. The duke thought about it. Yesterday he found these tracks here. It seems that the followers of the mist have become more active. The emperor replied that there was more bad news. Some scoundrel said that the fifth princess was to blame. The duke could not believe his ears. Are there really people who are trying to connect Princess Erin with these crimes? The emperor has suppressed all gossip about the princess, but it seems there is an influential group of nobles who want to use the princess. He asks his friend to take care of Princess Erin if the emperor suddenly dies. The duke took an oath that he would fulfill the emperor's request. Emilia screamed loudly in disappointment and indignation. Shun didn't understand. What did he do? Emilia, in turn, did not understand why the guy left the princess so quickly and did not even get to know her properly. So he will never marry. Cyan had no intention of marrying anyone. He didn't talk long and left his tent again despite the rain outside. Princess Erin was already waiting for him outside. She wanted to talk to him if he wasn't busy. As much as Cyan was not happy to see the princess, Emilia's guest was so happy. She invited the girl into the tent. Cyan greeted the princess unfriendly. He had his own business and she was disturbing him. The princess asked Emilia to leave them alone. When Emilia came out, the princess apologized for her behavior. Cyan also apologized for his rude words. The princess noted that Cyan is much more mature than he seems, and his differences from the princess are recognized. Cyan will also enter the academy and maybe they can... The boy interrupted the princess mid-sentence. He can't be of any use to her. The princess opened her mouth from such impudence. She just wanted to offer to be friends. Cyan was not going to be friends with her, and advised her to go to his place. The princess decided that Cyan thought like everyone else, that she was a dummy. This made her angry. As she left, she said that she just wanted to talk, but Cyan was completely different from his brother Axel. At this point, Cyan's eyes widened. He grabbed the princess by the hand and stopped her. She needed to find out how she knew Axel. The princess tried to break free and shouted that she met him last year at the academy, when she was there on an excursion. Axel advised her not to care what others think, but to simply fulfill her role as a princess. This advice seemed very dubious to Cyan. He knew well the character of the demonic bastard who was great at manipulating people. This means that from the moment they met, Axel set in motion a plan to destroy Princess Erin. He wanted to warn the princess about the danger that threatened her. At that moment, Emilia ran into the tent, shouting that the young master must run. The logs that supported the roof of the tent broke and collapsed. Emilia was thrown aside, and Cyan and the princess found themselves under the rubble. People ran to help, and Emilia sobbed in horror that the young master had died. A huge troll destroyed everything that came in his way. The emperor and the duke could not believe their ears when they heard what the knight had said to them. Top-ranked demonic beasts ambushed the rear camps of the border regions. Apparently, the princess was there when it happened. The emperor gave orders to all imperial troops to immediately go to the rear camps and ensure order and the safety of the princess. The emperor did not know why his daughter was in such a place at such a time. Did she want to see someone? At the camp, Cyan watched the demonic creatures from a hiding place. He saw both ogres and the death worm, and this did not add to his optimism. Something has changed in the valley. These creatures were supposed to live only in the depths of the valley. The rear camps were always safe. Emilia and the princess stood next to the boy. They were guarded by soldiers. Cyan wondered if it was he who provoked the creatures to such an attack. Emilia wept bitterly with happiness that the good gentleman survived and vowed never to leave him. When the ogre began to break down the tent, Cyan pushed Emilia away and covered the princess. Everything ended well. In his previous life, he killed the Demon King, as if some ogre could harm him now. The princess was worried whether the knights had survived the camp. Emilia replied that there was nothing to worry about. The knights were very strong, but the princess still blamed herself for coming here. The knights who accompanied her could also have suffered, but the knights were alive and ready to fulfill their duty to protect the princess. One of them promised that he would protect the princess, even at the cost of his own life. Their conversation was interrupted by Cyan shouting for everyone to move aside. The young knight did not see the huge ogre's hand hanging over him. He hesitated, not understanding what Cyan was shouting about. At that very second, he was grabbed by the monster. The ogre clutched the man in his fist, his eyes glowing with red fire. The princess was numb with fear. Cyan jumped out between the ogre and the girl with a sword in his hand. He understood that the monster was hunting him, and so it was. The monster threw out the person it did not need and headed towards the boy. Cyan managed to shout for the rest of the people to leave and he would distract the ogre. Emilia took the princess to safety. The ogre raised his clenched fists high, and Cyan drew his sword. He jumped high. High-ranking demonic beasts were rushing towards him. Did they really smell something? Cyan somersaulted in the air and struck the ogre, and landed behind the monster. The sword demon at this time reminded the guy that he had drunk a lot of medicine from the blood of demonic beasts. Therefore, they can smell blood a mile away, and it is not surprising that they are led to Cyan. Xian asked why she was only saying this now if she had known it for a long time. The demoness replied that she needed the boy's body. She was not his ally at all. Xian immediately grabbed her tail with an iron hand. The demoness didn't even have time to squeak. He hit her on the ground to shut her up. Xian didn't pay attention to her cries that she needed to be handled with care. The hellish beast turned and prepared to attack Xian, but he didn't care how many monsters would attack him. He rushed to attack. He jumped up and swung his sword, not paying attention to the terrible roar of the enemy, and he cut off his head in flight. The monster's blood gushed onto the ground. He already felt that the main enemy was over, and he would quickly deal with the little things. But what he saw made him not believe his eyes. A demonic dragon flew to the battle site. He opened his mouth, lined with sharp teeth, and let out a loud cry. The sword expressed his opinion that this was not an adult dragon, but just a baby. But he came, of course, to Cyan. Now the sword and Cyan were obliged not only to kill the dragon, they were obliged to absorb it. This would give them an inexhaustible supply of strength. The last ogre, struck by a dozen sparkling arrows, gave up the ghost. Knights under the command of the emperor and duke cleared the territory of the camps. There was no information about the princess and Cyan, and the emperor was very worried about this. The duke could find no trace of them outside the tent. The duke was sure that Cyan would not disappear, but there were questions about the princess. I had to find her urgently. The messenger brought the good news that the princess had been found. The girl rushed to her father alive and unharmed. She shouted that they needed to hurry up to save Cyan. It's because of her that Her voice broke from excitement. Her father asked her to calm down and tell her in detail what was happening. The duke stood behind and listened intently. He realized that you wouldn't learn anything from the princess and asked Amelia what happened. Amelia was frightened by the formidable appearance of the duke and replied that Cyan began to distract the monsters in order to give time for the women, accompanied by the knights, to retreat. The young knight volunteered to show where everything happened, but the duke refused to go to save his son. The emperor and princess thought that the duke had suddenly gone mad, but the duke replied that a more serious problem needed to be dealt with first. If the rear camps fall, the demonic beasts may invade the empire. The camps must be restored immediately. This is the only way to prevent further deaths. As for his son, he fulfilled his duty. Everyone who heard the duke froze and did not know what to say. The duke continued, "His son saved the princess, which means he is a real Vert, and this is something to be proud of." The princess decided that Cyan would die because of her. Her feeling of guilt increased tenfold. Suddenly the people heard such a terrifying scream that they would never forget. They looked up and saw a dragon flying in the sky. Sitting on the dragon, clinging to its scales, was Cyan. Dragons are the creatures closest to the Creator. These are very rare and noble creatures. Lower forms of life, such as humans, do not dare to approach them. Cyan had the great honor to meet such a high and powerful creation, and also to fly on it. But why did this creature decide to fly over those who should not have seen Cyan at that moment? The princess was already screaming at the top of her lungs that Cyan was flying there, and the emperor asked the duke why his son was flying on a dragon. The duke was stunned into silence. The emperor did not stop and asked if Dad was going to save his son. Cyan only wanted to drink the dragon's blood. He did not expect such a turn of events. Now he was cursing at the top of his lungs. He broke through to the dragon through a bunch of monsters without wasting time on them. With a swift, foggy storm, he and his sword scattered the creatures in different directions, and he stood opposite the dragon, who bared his teeth at the man. Of course, the sword was right. It was not an adult dragon. The dragon roared, a powerful stream of power flowing from its mouth. Cyan had to spread his legs wide to resist such pressure. But no one could resist the brute strength of the beast, and the boy flew back. Cyan became one with the sword, and responded to the brute force with a furious attack. The blows reached their target, and the beast roared in pain. Blood gushed from the wounds. The dragon went mad with pain. He saw his enemy running away and gave chase. Xian used the 8 fluttering petals technique, and cuts appeared on the monster's body. The boy understood that he could not kill the dragon. He had very little strength. But the dragon also decided not to mess with the crazy man, and turned around to fly away. Xian chased after him. He could not miss out on valuable prey. He jumped and found himself on the monster's clawed paw. Now he was flying above Dad and other people, and was thinking how he could get out of this situation. The demonic sword demanded the blood of the dragon. Cyan shouted that he could not use it in front of everyone. The scandal intensified with the sword and the boys shouting at each other. Cyan argued that he would immediately be burned at the stake as a black sorcerer, and this was not part of his plans. The demoness wondered if he was going to fly forever on this stupid dragon now. At this time, Pope Duke did not waste any time and built luminous letters with fiery swords on the ground. Cyan recognized advanced 8-star magic and felt sick. He didn't believe that Dad was going to use the secret sword of heaven. knowing that his son would also be dragged into it. The Duke raised his shining sword high. A dragon flew over him with Cyan on its wing. The Duke fully justified the title of Guardian of the Continent. The fiery swords rose into the air, but the dragon turned out to be not so simple. He successfully maneuvered between the swords, much to Cyan's joy. Another sword flew at the dragon with the boy, and Cyan thought that there was no way to avoid this. The dragon flew to the ground, throwing off its rider. Cyan flew after him. He could not take advantage of the fog, and could have been crushed into pieces, as the sword carefully reminded him of. Cyan didn't know what to do, but suddenly a thought came to his mind. The sword was not happy about this thought. They began to fall together, straight into a dirty stream that was mistakenly called a river. The demon realm also watched the dragon's flight in amazement. This was a rare sight for them too. The demons immediately determined that the dragon was young and in trouble. There must be very strong demonic beasts where he came from with such wounds. The second demon objected that this was done by people who live on the other side of the border. The demon could not believe that the dragon could lose to some people. He said he felt strange energy coming from there. Something wild, but at the same time familiar. He spread his wings and flew to see what was there. The second demon shouted after him that one must refrain from killing everything that moves just because it is boring. The man who flew away promised that there would be no problems. Cyan emerged from the stinking river. With great difficulty he got ashore. He did not like such a life and such adventures at all. He turned to Karim and asked if she was alive. The demoness replied that she was developing a way in which she would kill Cyan and get maximum pleasure. Cyan promised to clean it whenever he returns. The sword asked if the guy really hopes to return. If he doesn't know, she tells him that they are in the demon realm. Cyan confidently said that they would definitely not stumble upon the higher demon. At the same time, a voice was heard next to them. Someone was happy that they had found something interesting. Cyan's eyes widened. He remembered that voice. It was so deeply embedded in his brain that Cyan would never be able to forget it. At this time, the owner of a familiar voice approached the boy and asked if he was human. Standing in front of Cyan was the demon king Valkyrian. In the past, everyone who saw him said that he looked like the embodiment of evil. That's who stood in front of Cyan. Cyan stood up and drew his sword. This meeting was very inopportune. Valkyrian repeated the question, "Is this man in front of him?" When he saw that Cyan was about to fight him, the demon's eyes lit up with red fire. Is this little guy out of his mind? Cyan struck the demon with his sword, but it barely touched Valkyrian's hair. The demon laughed at the boy's ridiculous attempt. The sword came to life, and the demoness asked who they were going to fight. Cyan replied that he was with the demon king. And how is Cyan going to fight him in this state? The demon looked very impressive. Cyan can only try to escape. But Valkyrian unexpectedly advised the boy to relax. It will not harm the child. He lay down on the ground and promised not to hurt Cyan. He is, of course, a villain, but not to that extent. Cyan didn't understand why the demon king suddenly lay down in front of him. Valkyrian politely repeated his question. Is this a human being standing in front of him? Cyan admitted that he was human. The demon asked how he got here. The boy replied that he had sailed along the river, and this was his first time in the demon kingdom. The demon said that the boy had a very strange aura for an ordinary person, and there is a feeling that the boy knows him. How can this be? Cyan quickly replied that he had never seen Valkyrian. Cyan didn't recognize the demon king he knew in his previous life. This one was relaxed and not so angry. The boy asked what brought the demon here. Valkyrian simply felt an unusual energy as he walked around the area. As the king of demons, he's supposed to oversee the lands in his domain. Then it dawned on the demon that the boy was reacting too calmly to his words. He's not shocked by who he met. What child would react like that? All mothers scare their children with stories that the demon king will take them away if they are disobedient. Does the boy really know him? Cyan couldn't bear this stream of words. It cannot be that this is the same demon king. In a past life, the demon invasion began at this time. But this guy doesn't seem like the type to invade other people's lands. What made him change so much? The boy asked, if this is really the demon king in front of him, then what does he want to achieve? The demon replied that he wanted his people to live well and calmly, without needing anything. But if anyone gets in his way, he will kill everyone. This is his duty as the demon king. For just a moment, Cyan felt the true essence of Valkyrian, which he knew in his previous life. Now she is depressed, but some fateful incident brought her out. Cyan decided to prevent this at all costs. He invited the demon king to make a deal and said that trouble would soon happen to him, something that would threaten his people. The demon did not understand what the boy was talking about. This is some kind of nonsense. Cyan insisted that some incident would start a great war between humans and demons. He asked the demon king to promise not to start a war, no matter what happened. The demon suggested that he might not start a war, so what next? What will the boy give him in return? Cyan promised to help Valkyrian. He swore that no matter what happened to the Demon King, he would do whatever he could to help. The demon leaned over to the boy and asked what he knew. Cyan remained silent. Then the demon asked the boy's name, and he replied that his name was Cyan Vert. The demon promised Cyan Vert that under no circumstances would he invade human lands. He flew away and said goodbye that Cyan needed to take responsibility and his promise. A deal is a deal. After making an agreement with the Demon King, the search team found Cyan on the riverbank, and he was able to return to the people. After what happened, he received the nickname, the boy who survived the appearance of the devilish dragon. They returned to the abbey on the borders of Velias, which was temporarily being used as a hospital. Cyan was being treated there for minor wounds when the princess came to him, which did not make the boy happy. The princess, without much conversation, asked him if he would serve her. Fuan categorically replied that he would not. The princess did not expect such an answer. She said that she was a mediocre princess and was very upset. She irritated Cyan very much. He knew that she was untalented, but he hated to think that his piece of shit brother Axel was involved in her tragic end. Cyan told the princess that she could not be useful to people in the state she was in now. However, he will watch her from afar until she changes for the better. The princess realized that he was inviting her to become better enough for him to recognize her. She promised that she would become so powerful that Cyan would not be able to ignore her. Before leaving, the princess thanked Cyan for keeping him alive. Winter has arrived in the rear camp on the outskirts of the forest. A man walked through the snow. In his hands he held a strange artifact that looked like a box. The artifact lit up with a bright light. The man looked at him and was glad that there was very little left to complete his journey. Suddenly he felt that his body was not moving, as if he were bound by invisible chains. A man came out from behind the tree and was glad that the sale of the valuable artifact, the spatial box, had not yet taken place. An artifact endowed with spatial power and a large amount of mana, which allows you to endlessly store things inside. Cyan Vert approached the immobilized man and asked if he had in his hands the very masterpiece of the Association of Magicians of the Kingdom of Garum. Cyan followed him for a whole year. It seemed to him that someone in the Empire was transporting contraband. Now it's clear how they did it. Cyan took the box from the man's motionless hands. Ronald Crimson, a 7-star mage knight from the Kingdom of Garum, and was a smuggler. He recognized Cyan Vert and couldn't believe his eyes. The boy was enveloped in a thick crimson fog. Why is this boy here? Shin opened the box and various magical objects fell out. Cyan concluded that this is how drugs from the blood of demonic beasts are smuggled into the Empire. Ronald desperately denied everything and swore that he knew nothing. Cyan advised him not to pretend to be an idiot. All this is sold on the black markets. Ronald desperately wondered who betrayed them, and he understood that he could not allow the boy to leave here alive. He felt that he could move again, and began to perform magical actions. Having created the magical sign Breath of Fire, he threw it at Cyan with a cry, "Die!" The boy lost his vigilance, and the price for this was death. Cyan saw a burning ball flying towards him. A huge wall of fire consumed everything in its path. Ronald sat near the tree and looked at the fire he created. He was sorry that he had lost the precious box. He did not expect that this could happen during transportation. Suddenly his hand came off and blood gushed out of the wound. A menacing black mist emerged from the flames. Cyan came out of the fire and fog and stood opposite Ronald. He grabbed the knight by the throat and offered to choose, tell about the smuggling route and the spy in the Empire, and then die a peaceful death, or end my life in such agony that even Satan will shed a tear. Trading post on the western border of Velias. Sellers were putting goods on the shelves. Among them were those who sold contraband. They were happy that they would earn a lot of money today. Several boxes of goods arrived, but when they opened the box, a cry of horror escaped from their chests. Ronald's head was in the box. Cyan watched the commotion in the market. He hoped his threat was understood correctly. The 7-star magic knight of the Garum Kingdom, Ronald Crimson, was smuggling the blood of demonic beasts from the front behind the Ushif Empire. The goods were delivered to the Garum Magicians Association. The Garum Magicians Association is a place where those obsessed with magic gather. They study the origins and foundations of magic and create new ones. They strive to transcend the limits of humanity and create useful artifacts such as dimensional boxes. Cyan knew that in the future they would do crazy things with the blood of demonic beasts, and he wanted to put an end to it. Residents in the Ushif Empire. Axel Worth received an unpleasant letter. He learned that Cyan had gone to the front with his father. This boy always pissed him off. With a wicked grin, Axel thought that he should visit his brother. Meanwhile, Amelia rejoiced. They finally left the front. She was sure that the academy could not compare with this gloomy place. Cyan was sure that for him, the academy would be the beginning of hell. The academy is unlikely to live up to Amelia's expectations. This place is riddled with political intrigue and machinations, Envy and jealousy rule there, and communication and connections take precedence over education. Amelia heard that there are many beautiful instructors at the academy, and she hopes that romance will appear in her life. Cyan doubted his maid's mental abilities. Cyan walked through the streets of a peaceful city. He accidentally met Krantz, his brother, but did not even have time to say hello to him. Krantz instantly disappeared with a cry of horror. The sword demoness asked who this idiot was. Cyan advised her to ignore his half-brother. She asked if there were any relatives with whom Cyan was on good terms. Cyan remembered Alice. He always had a close relationship with her. He is at odds with a completely different relative. Cyan arrived at the castle. At the threshold he was met by numerous servants. Previously, they didn't even look at him. But now they greet him so respectfully, as if the Duke himself or the bastard Axel were in his place. Cyan saw that a lot had changed over the past year. He touched the doorknob of his room and felt an aura. He recognized her immediately. She made him shiver. Yes, there's that scoundrel at the door. A smiling Axel stood on the threshold. He joyfully greeted Cyan, whom he had not seen for a long time. Cyan froze on the threshold. Axel asked if his brother really didn't remember him. Cyan tried to calm down and did not answer. Axel continued that it was not surprising that Cyan forgot him. The last time they saw each other was before Axel entered the academy. Cyan couldn't calm down. The thirst for revenge overwhelmed him. He really wanted to kill Axel on the spot and held the sword behind his back. But the sword demon forced Cyan to give it up. This would be the last thing Cyan did in his life. He calmed down, bowed, and as the youngest son of the family greeted his elder brother. Of course he remembers it. Axel put his hand on the boy's head and said that it made him happy. He was very afraid that his brother would forget him. He noted that he had been following Cyan's progress and knew that his swordsmanship skills had improved. Soon he will be able to help the Vertov house, and even Axel himself. Cyan will be able to help on the battlefield. Cyan replied that he was looking forward to it too. His eyes lit up with an evil fire. Axel replied that he was glad to hear this and came here only to see his younger brother. Cyan knew that Axel never paid attention to useless people. Knowing that this bastard was here for a reason helped Cyan finally calm down. He smiled sincerely and admitted that he also missed his older brother. Amelia, indignant that Cyan did not carry his luggage, dragged her suitcases along the corridor. She burst into the room with the firm intention of giving the brat a beating, but she immediately fell silent when she saw Axel in the room. He smiled sweetly and said that he had heard that the maid treated Cyan very well. He won't stop her from doing her job. With these words, he left. Cyan could no longer hold back and asked Amelia to leave him alone. He asked the sword demon why she stopped him. She was surprised. Shouldn't the boy have thanked her for this? Cyan replied that it was a good chance for her too. She could take over his body. The demoness replied that she wanted his rage to grow, so he would become even tastier. It didn't look like her, and Cyan smiled. Axel was sitting in his office when there was a knock on the door. The servant reported that he had found the second young lady, as Mr. Axel had asked. She is in the north in the lands of the White Elves, Pruina. Axel knew that Pruina was known for hating outsiders. He believed it had to do with her blood heritage. He told the servant to let him know if it seemed like she was going back. The servant asked why Axel was smiling so much. Did something good happen? Was meeting your little brother fun? Axel replied that he could say so and laughed, but the servant was mistaken. Axel is in a very bad mood. Axel's eyes lit up with blue fire. The servant quickly bowed and asked for forgiveness. Axel noticed Cyan's gaze when he met him. The boy looked at him as if he were a sworn enemy. Or did he imagine it? The boy got on his nerves and he ordered him to keep an eye on him so that he would not fight off his hands. The servant said that he would entrust this to someone. Axel was left alone and wondered, what is Cyan Vert hiding?